everyone. Thanks for tuning into Sin's Workshop. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. So today we're going to be reviewing Not for the Faint of Heart by Lex Croucher. This was a book given to me by the publisher. It was an ARC. Definitely not an ARC now. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to read this book. I have to say I thoroughly did enjoy it. So it's not exactly a Robin Hood retelling, so to speak. It follows Mariel. She is the granddaughter of Robin Hood. And Mariel has kind of gone astray. She's always constantly trying to prove herself to her father, who is the current leader of the Merry Men, but they're very much, in fact, different than the Merry Men from Robin Hood's, day, right? They've changed. They've become a little bit more aggressive. They're not so merry anymore. Let's just say that. I'm sorry, I'm still recovering from a cold. Mariel is very much a grumpy sunshine, and her plan kind of just goes astray when she accidentally kidnaps Clem, who's a healer in the backwood, and her code is she will heal anyone who comes to her door, whether they are the men of Nottingham or if they are merry men. She will heal, ask no questions, and take care of whoever comes to her door. So this kind of puts her in a tough position. And of course, this is a female-female, this is a sapphic romance. And there is a lot of gender fluidity. You find out, Robin Hood was bisexual. Yes, he married Mariel, and yes, they had a kid and they had a family, but Mariel soon became disillusioned with life of merry men. And Robin Hood ran off to be with his lieutenant, a man. And I think that is great that that's in there. If you know the original story of Robin Hood, Maid Marian wasn't actually in the original tale. She was introduced half a century later or a century later, so they're called the Merry Men because they are supposed to be queer. That's just classic lore. It was always the implication of the original text that they were queer, but it wasn't until Catholics started to get involved that they're like, we need a woman in here. Enter Maid Marian. And classic tale of Robin Hood, he didn't just steal from the rich and get to the poor. He took his cut. And he wasn't like a rough scoundrel. He wasn't all noble. So I do like the way that Lex Croucher kind of leaned into that. That made my nerd heart happy. Because it's very obscure. Not a lot of people know it. So it made my nerd heart happy for her to lean into that with the storytelling here. I think Clem and Mariel balance each other out really, really well. I love their character dynamic. The banter between them is hilarious because Clem's just like a ray of sunshine. She's a do-gooder, and then you have stubborn, grumpy sunshine Mariel. So I like how they balance each other out, and I like the way that they kind of awaken each other's mentality in a way. They open each other's eyes, There's a lot of complications with this whole thing because, there's a rat in the Merry Men, and Mariel has to go save her father Jack, who's kind of a dick. So you also have to deal with legacy and somewhat toxic parenting. Both her parents suck. They suck. Clem's an orphan, but Mariel might as well be, I keep wanting to say Marian. Mariel might as well be an orphan with the way that her parents treat her. Her father has absolutely no faith in her as a leader, and he's kind of just a dick. So she constantly has to try to prove herself, and she's constantly second-guessing herself. So you get to see her kind of battling herself instead of just trusting her instincts, which are great. She has great instincts, and it takes some time for the story to actually kind of develop that, but in a good way because it lends to the characterization and the character depth that goes into the actual storytelling. And I like with Clem too, she kind of say she changes, but she grows. Because she's still going to help anyone, even if they are the men of Nottingham, the sheriff's men. Sorry. Like I said, recovering from a cold. You know, she would still help them. Because that's her creed, to help someone. But I think what she does do is she brings a balance. And she kind of brings both sides to the table and be like, okay, Jack, the way you're leading the merry men isn't the way Robin Hood would be leading the merry men. And then she goes to the Sheriff of Nottingham's son and it's just like, I can tell you want to be a different man from your father. So it's like this whole thing by the end of the book. So she helps bring more faith back to the community in Robin Hood and the merry men. And I like that. I like how her character grows. I like how her character kind of has to rectify with death because her whole creed is healing. She doesn't want to be a killer, but she does want to be part of the merry men. But she doesn't like the merry men as they are now. So it's all of her trying to like get to Mariel and be like, you want to be a better person than your father. Why don't you? It's like, you've accidentally kidnapped me. You keep putting a hood over my head. You keep tying me up. But it's like, I'm not going anywhere because I like you. But your actions speak louder than words. Like, look at the community. They no longer have any faith in you because you're acting like the sheriff's men. Like, you're seeking out the violence versus being responding to the violence. Like, so Clem kind of sees both sides of it because merry men have become the aggressors. They're not so much the men hiding in the woods, robbing from the rich, giving to the poor to undo the unjust actions of the people in power. They are becoming, they're instigators. You know, they've become instigators. And so they've lost the faith of the people. And Clem sees that because she loses her faith as well for a little bit, but then she regains it in her dynamic with Mariel. So that's where her character development comes alive. Because her and Mariel really do evolve together. You know, there's no one that just kind of evolves on their own. They evolve together because they open each other's eyes to the whole situation without that narrow scope of this is what I was taught and this is what I have to follow. This is what I need to do to prove myself kind of mentality. So it really was an interesting story. I liked it a lot. There were times when the pacing did lag a little bit. And I found myself getting a little bored. I'm like, okay, can we, like, come on, let's just move on. It was just, sometimes it was a little too verbose. And I just wanted the pacing to just keep going. Because it did have good pacing. But then when those lulls happened, especially when nothing kind of happened in those lulls, it wasn't like, oh, here's a lull because this is finally revealing their feelings for each other. Like, you want a lull like that. But it's like, okay, this scene has dragged on too long. And it needs to be wrapped up. Especially in a high-stakes scene. It's like, okay, come on, let's move it forward. But it stops around the halfway point. And once you get to the halfway point, the ball just continues to keep rolling. So the first half does have a lot of lulls in there. Especially because there's a lot of backstory that begins to slowly get unveiled. But it didn't fall in line with the pacing very well. It didn't flow. You know what I mean? But honestly, it was a really good book. It was really interesting. I'm glad the publisher sent me a copy. This is not a book I would normally seek out. As much as I love retellings, it's still considered like a contemporary romance. So it's not a book that I would go out of my lengths to buy. Maybe audiobook it. Maybe rent it from the library if I have time. But it's not a book that I would go out of my way. Be like, oh yeah, I totally want to read this book. I totally need it. I'm gonna read it. Bye. It's not a I need to read book. But I am glad I read it. And I'm glad the publisher sent it to me. So that way I can like push myself a little bit more. And it didn't really cost me a penny. In any case, thank you all for tuning into this review. Please want to like, subscribe, and share with my book with your friends. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy reading.